Hungarian Folk Tales. The astronomer, the thief, the huntsman, and the tailor. Once upon a time there lived a poor man. And the poor man had 4 sons. But the poor man was so poor that he had no money to keep his sons. One day the poor man said, "The time has come for you to leave home and seek your fortunes. You should all go and learn a trade." So the 4 sons set off into the wide world. The sons soon came to a crossroads that branched off into 4 different directions. So the sons agreed to part company and all meet back at the crossroads in a year and a day. Time passed and each of the sons studied a trade. The first son became an astronomer, the second a thief, the third was a huntsman, and the youngest a tailor. So they met again after a year and a day, and they journeyed back home to tell their father of the jobs they now all had. "Well done, sons. I believe you all, but I still would like to see proof of the new trades you practice. You, my son, the astronomer, what do you see on top of that tree?" "I see a nest with 5 eggs, and a golden bird is sitting on them." "You, my son, the thief, if that is indeed your trade, go now to the nest and steal the eggs from under the golden bird without ruffling a feather on its head." So the thief climbed up the tree and succeeded in stealing the eggs unseen, and he gave the eggs to his father. The old man put the eggs on the table. He placed 1 egg at each corner and then put the 5th egg in the middle. "You, my son, the huntsman, if that is indeed your trade, shoot each egg with 1 shot and split them in 2. So the huntsman shot and hit all 5 eggs in turn. "Well done, son. You are a master of your craft." "You, 4th son, the tailor, if that is indeed your trade, stitch all 5 eggs back together so that the chicks inside each survive." So the tailor stitched the eggs back together and did an excellent job of work. But they would not know if all was well until the eggs eventually hatched. "Now, thief, you must put the eggs back under the golden bird unnoticed." The thief succeeded, and only a few days later, all 5 eggs hatched out, and the golden bird was delighted with the chicks. But each chick had a tiny red band around its neck where the tailor had stitched them back together. "Now, my sons, you have proven your trades to me, but now you must prove them to the wide world." News soon came that the princess was lost, so the astronomer's son took out his spyglass and saw the pretty girl sitting on a rocky island in the middle of a vast ocean. And he saw a fierce dragon sleeping on the princess's lap. So the astronomer's son went directly to the king and requested a boat to rescue his royal daughter. The 4 sons voyaged to the rocky island where they discussed how best to save the princess. The tailor's son suggested they shoot the dragon, but the astronomer's son was worried that they would hit the pretty princess. "But you, thief, if you could steal the eggs, steal her from the dragon." And the thief stole the princess unseen. Then they took the girl onto the boat and sailed slowly back to the shore. But that is when the dragon awoke, and the fearsome beast caught sight of them. The princess had gone, and the dragon flew after them. The dragon saw that the boat was nearing the shore and knew that the princess must be on board, so it swooped down to the boat. But the huntsman's son saw the mighty dragon coming, and he shot it in the heart. Then the dragon fell from the sky onto the boat and smashed it into smithereens, leaving only a few planks of floating wood that the sons held onto. Then the huntsman said, "We'll surely perish in these waters." So the tailor's son swiftly stitched the boat back together, and everyone aboard survived. The old king was a very happy man when he saw his daughter again, and he asked the 4 young men, "Which one of you deserves my daughter's hand?" The astronomer's son said, "Me, sire, for I sighted her in the middle of the ocean." The thief said, "Me, sire, for I stole her quietly away." "Seeing her was not enough, brother, if you weren't brave enough to go and get her." Then the huntsman said, "Getting her was not enough, because if I hadn't shot the fearsome dragon, it would have eaten us all up." Then the tailor said, "Only I deserve the princess, sire, because if I hadn't stitched the boat back together, we would have all surely drowned." And the brothers began to fight. So the old king said, "I cannot grant my daughter's hand to all 4 of you, and so instead I shall grant you each a portion of my kingdom. Will that suffice? Because the princess is very pretty, but living in peace is better still." So all 4 sons received a quarter of the kingdom, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Little Diogenes. When I was a little lad, my father sent me out to the forest to watch the cows grazing. He told me to keep a close eye on the herd because if any of the cows strayed away, he'd skin me alive. I tried to watch them as best I could, but I found a blackberry bush by the edge of the forest with ripe berries on it that were big and fat and black. Well, like I said, I was only a lad, and I instantly forgot what my father had said and set to work eating as many berries as I could manage. And while I stood feeding my face, the 2 cows strayed away from the grass meadow and began to make a meal of valuable hay. And just as that was happening, the devil sent the local constable, who cracked his whip and drove those 2 stray cows away from the hay they shouldn't have eaten. I gave chase as best I could and appealed to the menacing man. "Constable, please, they're my father's cows. Let them go with me." But the man took no notice at all and saddled his horse and rode away. He set out for the town and I followed him as best I could on foot, but he was soon far out of sight. So what was I to do? I couldn't stand before my father without his precious cows. I thought it best to run away instead and drown my sorrows as best I could. So I sat on a pile of pebbles by the side of the road and wept and wailed, for I was still only a lad and I'd had to leave home. Soon a woman passed and she said, "Why are you weeping, young lad? What on earth occurred?" So I told her of my troubles and that I did not dare to return home, or else my father would surely skin me alive. My parents would never see me again and I would be orphaned and homeless. "Don't be so foolish, young lad," said the woman. "A parent's punishment strengthens the soul, but a blow from a stranger only bruises a boy's body. Now take yourself home before it gets dark." "I will not," I told her boldly. When the woman saw that she spoke to me in vain, she washed my filthy face, then she took me by the hand and led me to a large stone house. When we reached the kitchen, she placed a plate of steaming porridge before me, but my belly was so filled with berries that I couldn't swallow as much as a spoonful. But I didn't dare leave it because I thought she'd think me ungrateful. So I took the porridge and spooned it under my shirt. Then after I'd fed my shirt this fine supper, I lay down by the stove to warm myself. And as I lay in the snug, my sadness slowly slipped away, and I was happy to have found comfort in the kitchen of this motherly woman. But it wasn't long before her husband returned, who was not what I'd call a fatherly man. As he caught sight of me lying on the blanket, he complained to his wife, "Why have you brought another hungry mouth to the house? But he's nothing more than a lost lad. I thought he could help about the farm." "Help? With what? A skinny thing like him will eat us out of house and home." "Hey you, get up and lift up this sack of corn. I want to see if you're strong enough to be of service here." I tried to lift the heavy sack, but my 8 years proved not enough to lift the heavy weight. But I was soon undone when my belt burst open, my shirt shot out of my trousers, and a pool of porridge landed on the floor. "You filthy thief! You have stolen from us on your very first day here." And he took out a whip to give me a thrashing. The wife begged him to spare me, but instead he grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and stuffed me into a barrel. Then he sealed the barrel tight and rolled it far from the house so that no one passing would hear my cries. "And there you'll stay, you filthy thief, and tomorrow I'll have you locked in jail," he snarled. I was now stuck tight inside the barrel and could do nothing more than groan and moan. But then in my hour of greatest need, I remembered a lesson we'd had at school about a wise old man by the name of Diogenes, who used to live in a barrel much as this. Then I thought of a plan. I had a knife in my pocket and I could wedge it in between the staves, but the barrel was made of old oak and the wood was so hard that my knife broke. Then I sighted a fox that alighted in the garden. The chicken shed was closed and so the fox began to nose around my barrel. The fox appeared at the very best time, as I had an idea that made me feel as wise as old Diogenes. And I started to make a noise like a laying hen. Cluck, 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 cluck. What a good place to sit. Instead of eggs, I'm sitting atop a pile of sweet honeycomb. Oh, my dear little hen, would you give your friend the fox a taste of that sweet honey you have? Of course, my foxy friend. Simply stick your tail in and I shall smear it with sweet honey that you can lick off later. The foolish fox did just as I suggested and popped its tail in through the hole that I grabbed and held onto with all my might. The hen thief thought it was caught for good and began to leap about the place. And it leapt and jumped, jumped and leapt until the barrel had broken apart. Free at last, I ran and ran until I found home. My parents were happy that I'd returned. My father gave me a harsh beating for my sins and not watching over his valuable cows. But my mother rubbed my back with soothing cream, and I continued to grow in my loving home. Hungarian Folk Tales. First the dance, then the feast. Once upon a time there lived a poor man. He had even more children than a sieve has holes, and he owned nothing more than a small house. But then the poor man was forced to move out of his home because his landlord wanted so much corn in payment for his rent that he had to leave. And so the poor man decided to hide. In the forest, he met an old man, and the old man asked the poor man where he was going. The poor man told him about his landlord's cruelty. "Don't be so sad, poor man, because I shall give you a fiddle, and whenever you play it, your landlord will dance." The poor man happily took the fiddle, but told the old man that he was still very hungry indeed and he could not return home with a fiddle. Then the old man gave him the gift of a table. "Whatever you wish for will appear on this table." So the poor man slapped his hand hard on the table and shouted, "Porridge and beans." And when the poor man's belly was full, he set off to go home. When the poor man arrived, he discovered that his cruel landlord had already evicted his dear wife and darling children. "Now I shall pay and you shall dance," and the poor man began to fiddle. And the poor man's landlord danced and danced and danced and grew very tired indeed. But as the poor man played as long as he could, his landlord kept on dancing. When the poor man took a rest, the landlord ran back to the mayor's office to report that he wouldn't stop fiddling. But the poor man followed the landlord back to the office and began to fiddle again. "Dance, landlord, dance!" Then the landlord danced into the office and shouted. The men in the office soon grew bored with the poor man's fiddling and they ordered him to leave at once. "Now you should dance too," the poor man commanded. And everyone in the mayor's office began to dance around. They put down their pens and danced a merry jig together. Then the policeman heard the news and ran to the mayor's office. "Get out of here, poor man!" But the poor man shouted, "Now you should dance too!" And the policemen all began to dance around. The women sent word for policemen to come from the next village, and these policemen soon arrived and tried to chase the poor man away. "Now you should dance too!" Now the whole marketplace was filled with people dancing around. Then the soldiers marched up and the poor man said, "Now you should dance too, as best you can." News of the dancing finally found its way to the king's ears. "Now the king should dance too," the poor man demanded. So the king joined in the frantic dance. The queen of the kingdom contacted the king from the neighbouring land, and this king arrived with his army, and the country was soon filled with his foreign soldiers. The second king called upon the poor man to desist. The two dancing kings put their crowns down at his feet and gave him their lands. So peace returned, and the dancing eventually ended. Now all the dancers had grown so hungry and asked the poor man to feed them at last. The poor man took out his table, slapped it and said, "Porridge and beans." Then everyone sat down to enjoy the meal, and the tiny table made more and more and more of the food. The people standing next to the table were lucky, but the ones at the back could not reach the porridge pot, and the people pushed the kings into the beans. The king's shouts were soon drowned out, and both kings drowned in the big pot of beans. No one felt sad that the kings had gone, and all pushed forward to eat their fill. Everyone ate and ate till all was gone, and they all had a splendid time indeed.